Just want to give you a fair warning that this tutorial is a little more complicated than some of my other ones, and it took me several tries to build it myself following my instructions, but it's still the easiest way for me to show you how to build it. So welcome everyone to another tutorial. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to build this very elegant Chinese dragon statue, which by the way is my first attempt at anything like this, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. Now I could have made it more complex than I did. I did try to tone it down a little bit to make it a little simpler, but it's still a pretty complicated build to follow along with. So unless you have a lot of patience, I do have a feeling this is going to take a long time to build because I tried to make it as interesting and detailed as possible. But if you stick with it, it will be worth it in the end. So let's talk about all the specifics for this statue. It will be 35 by 13 by 15 blocks in space. We're going to be building this from the ground up, one layer at a time, so it will be 15 layers in total. Here's a list of all of the basic blocks you'll need to gather for this. Once I'm finished with the build, I will be showing you some additional ways you could color it, but these are going to be the base blocks I'm using. With all that out of the way, let's get started building. Like I said at the beginning, this build is a little more complicated, so I tried my best to make it as clear as possible, especially for this first layer, in which we're starting with 3 of the feet. I would recommend marking out the space between all the feet as I have done. It really saved me a lot of time and helped me figure out where to place everything so that the rest of the build should flow together smoothly. Once you finish with the first layer, move on to the second one. And the easiest way to start a new layer is to start placing blocks based on where the previous one is. Wherever you see white, that is representing the previous layer's blocks. If you've never done any tutorials like this before, pay close attention to the stair icons because they will be pointing in the direction that that stair needs to be facing. And then you can also look at it and see whether it's upside down or right side up. Just another fair warning, you may have trouble seeing some of the shapes in my blueprint on the left, but that's the best I could do with the size, and I still prefer this method over showing you block for block placement just because those videos can be much longer and much more tedious and much harder to keep track of. I'm not going to commentate too much on what each individual layer is doing, just continue to follow the grid and take your time doing so. For anyone who's never done a tutorial like this before, or for all of you who follow my tutorials regularly, I'm just going to take a moment and mention why I make my tutorials like this. I think it's far easier to figure out a key in a blueprint and then to find your place really quickly than it is to follow a block for block tutorial and constantly get lost in it. Nothing against block for block tutorials because I do them sometimes, but for builds such as this one that's so big, you would get lost really quickly. At least this way you have a good stopping point and startup point you can pick at any time, and you can always go back and study it for as long as you need to, and you can pause it, place a whole lot of blocks down, instead of pausing it every 2 seconds just to place a couple blocks. So while some people still might say this is too complicated, which I know it can be at times because I even struggled with this particular one I'm showing you now, but still I think it's a much easier approach to this size of a tutorial. Well, now that I have explained myself very thoroughly, let's get back to talking about this actual statue, shall we? Now that we have connected both ends of the dragon, it's going to get a little more complicated from now on. So I'm going to be zooming in on my building on the right, just so you can see what I'm doing if it helps you to watch me build. On layer 10, we're going to be starting adding in details to the actual face. I will be adding a tongue using granite slabs. That's completely optional though, but I do like how it looks in the final build. And take great care with the tail because we're going to be starting a lot of floating blocks. Make sure you measure all those empty spaces accurately because it will be so much easier when we get to the next layer, which is this monstrosity. This is where things start to get a little more complicated. There's a lot more floating blocks you have to be mindful of, but again, it's not that bad once you realize everything is on the same level. As long as you're measuring out all the empty spaces, you should be fine. Layer 12 isn't much better than the last one because we still have a lot of floating blocks to work with. But once you see what these blocks are doing and what the shapes are creating, you could almost do it freehand and not even follow the grid. But I'll leave it up to you if you want to do exactly what I've built or if you want to add your own creative flair to it. Layer 13 is a little special because we're placing a couple of blocks for the eye, which is represented by those 2 black blocks on the left. And for those blocks, it will be 1 black block of your choice plus a dried kelp block. You can see how I placed them on the right, and that just adds some additional texture that otherwise wouldn't be there. It just looks cool, okay? The last 2 layers are calming down quite a bit with not nearly as many blocks to place. Although it still might be a little bit confusing to figure out where everything goes. Just relax, it doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, if you do make a mistake, as long as the build looks okay, that's all that really matters. Well, if you've made it this far, then maybe you are sick of building this dragon, but if you wanted to continue and make it even cooler, here are some different ways we could shade it and improve upon this design. Mostly it's just block changes and adding some additional shading like I said. So I'm starting off by replacing the top parts of the dragon with acacia wood. It's just slightly lighter than the red sandstone and it gives it just enough variation to make it a little brighter. On the tail, I wanted to add a really cool gradient that went to a deep red. So I started at the tip with a deep red nether brick and then gradually worked my way around using lighter and lighter red blocks and just blended it smoothly into the red sandstone using various oranges and reds. And even just those few changes really add to this design and just really make it come to life that much more. So get creative with however you want to finish the statue, whether it be adding a flame to the eye or to the nostrils, or even just changing the colors as I have done. I think a blue dragon of this shape would look very nice. Not unlike this blue dragon over here. He's pretty cool, pun intended. At any rate, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. It took me quite a long time to make, but I am very pleased with how it turned out and I'm so happy I get to share it with you. If it does frustrate you to no end to build a statue, I would completely understand because I actually struggled with it myself. But I know you got this, you can do it. Have a great rest of your day or night, and I will see you later. Bye!